So today we interviewed Greg Fariicielli, and actually I think it's actually Fariicelli, but it's more fun the other way. And I feel like I can go like this. But he's based out of Florida, investing in Tennessee, and he has. So I don't think it was actually in the episode, but in talking with him, he mentioned going from broke 10 years ago to where he is now, which you'll have to listen to find out where he is now, but it's very impressive.
Yeah. From working at a fast food restaurant to potentially, you'll find out, multi-millionaire.
I don't know that it was a fast food restaurant. I just think it might have been just a regular restaurant. Although he said, because he mentioned tips, but nowadays fast food restaurants get tips too. So could have been any
That's
restaurant.
True. Let's talk about that.
All right. Well, welcome to the Investing RN podcast. Today we're joined by Greg Fariicelli out of Florida, but investing in Tennessee and Kentucky, doing syndications, land development, all kinds of different things we're going to get into today. This will be exciting for us because there's land development is something we have not talked about, something we're interested in personally. And so we're looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about, your beginnings in business and work and where your career started initially?
Yeah, I could. I've been in the business for 8 years. Nashville-based real estate professional. Started in Nashville. That's where I got my license. That's where I lived at the time. And now I'm based in St. Pete, Florida, because I got married recently. We love it here, and it's 0 degrees there while it's 70 degrees here. I'll take that anytime. I've been developing land with a company that I own, our partner in it called Rhythm Development. I'm a broker at Hive Nashville, and then also I'm licensed in Florida at Dalton Wade. I have Stacked University, where I teach students how to become real estate investors. Stacked Capital is a capital company that we invest in syndications, and that's basically it. So past 8 years, started as an agent, then kind of transitioned step at a time into different things.
Okay. What was your intro? Because I assume you didn't come right out of college or right out of high school and just hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to do this. I'm going to start by getting my real estate license, I guess.
So let's go back.
So what led to that?
That's such a great question. Let's go back to 2008 when I thought it was a great idea to buy a house. Okay. In Florida, because that's where I lived, a different part. Had to do a short sale 6 months or a year later. Wasn't able to buy any property. And that's when I moved to Nashville in 2009. I'm just I'm out of here. 2015 rolls around. I'm I can't retire from working in restaurants and playing music and doing all this stuff. It's I need something else, right? So I got my real estate license in 2015. And then from there, I started wholesaling pretty much right away with a company in Nashville that was not doing things in a way that I continue to do them. So once I exited that and got into a better environment, it really took off to a lot of different things from there.
This episode is sponsored by All Day Investments. If you would like to get your start in real estate investing, but don't want to deal with toilets or tenants, we have several new opportunities that might interest you. Head over to alldayinvestments.co/invest or follow the link in our show notes to book a call with our team.
You said you started off with wholesaling after getting your license. I know I've heard different things, in some states you need your license. So did you get your license to wholesale or to actually?
No.
Okay.
I honestly didn't know I was wholesaling. I didn't really know. I just was doing what I was told to do and taught on this team. So a lot of it was a mixture of listings, buyers, and some wholesales. And the wholesales I was getting a network of a lot of people that wanted these deals. So every time I even find a lead on Facebook or something random, I was able to sell it. So then we were figuring out some leads that we got some land. And I got a call from a guy one day who's hey, I got this property. It's we can do, I think it was 14 units on it. And I want 175. I was wow, that's cool. This is back in probably 2016 maybe. And then we had the deal, and then he told me that they had title issues. It's going to take about a year to clear up, that he'd call me back. And the dude actually called me back, and I ended up buying the deal. So I was I can pay you $175,000. I can write you a contract, and I can assign to somebody else. I can list it for you as an agent. I don't care how you want to handle it. He's like, I don't care how you handle it. I was like, well, then I'm going to give you a contract and I'm going to try to wholesale. If not, I'll turn it into a listing. He's like, perfect. So I sent it out to my list and I got a random call from someone that was interested in the property. I said, well, cool. Are you a builder? What do you do? He had a couple properties already in Nashville, so he's kind of familiar with it. And he asked me how much I wanted for it. I was like, well, that depends. I was like, either you can give me the 12 back-end listings at this price or you can buy me out at this price. So he decided to keep me in the deal, and then that's how that kind of started.
So you mentioned short sale earlier. I don't think that term's come up on here yet.
That's a good thing. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. I was just going to say it's not usually associated with a good situation. So what exactly is that?
So a short sale is when basically the bank is going to agree for you to settle on a different loan amount that you went under the mortgage agreement with. So if you had a loan for $200,000 and like you short sold it to somebody for 60, the bank agrees to let you off the hook on that. Usually it hurts your credit for 6 or 7 years. The only advantage on the flip side of that is that little period between not paying their payments and bank notifications is a great opportunity to be able to sub to those deals before they get to a short sale and they save. So you can rent them back to the people or just buy the houses on a sub to. That little time period, it's usually only a month that these people haven't paid and it hasn't been recorded yet. Because once the bank gets a hold of it, then you have to go through the short sale process. So this is that little time period where the seller, the owner, still has the control of the property.
Okay. Do you think that's going to be the case coming up pretty soon? I know inflation kind of helped out and you didn't really need any of those the last 10 years.
The only distress that I see are syndicators and large funds that bought on bridge debt and did not account for the new market conditions and are not able to refi that bridge debt. So like you'll see like these big apartment buildings that are going under foreclosure and stuff because they can't, their business plan was to refi the bridge debt. Well, the problem is they couldn't refi, so they had to give back to the banks. So everybody lost their money. So that's why in a syndication, I would never invest on a syndication if they were doing it on permanent debt or not on permanent debt. So if they're doing it on the temporary debt, the bridge debt, if I understand that I'm only going to be in it for 6 months and I have maybe a different buyer profile, I would do it. But other than that, I wouldn't do it only with permanent debt. I want to be the investor on the permanent debt. So I could sell it and refi and then so that was just learned through that.
Yeah. When I just heard of this, I think, was it Houston or Dallas somewhere in Texas, another $500 million property just went.
We probably heard the same one. Yeah. I'm sure there's other ones too. I've heard of quite a few actually. And I'm getting calls from lenders like, hey, I got this loan coming due. Are you looking to buy something? Like I'm getting leads to buy property from lenders that know me that are having distressed borrowers, which is a fantastic lead source.
I think that's something we keep hearing is like, there's a lot of doom and gloom being kind of like talked of in the real estate world. But then we hear from people like you that it's like, hey, there's some big opportunities coming up. So what are you guys doing to prepare for that?
So I guess, I almost want to say the biggest thing is I know that there's opportunities and I just choose to believe that there's opportunities. So I see them. So just like I can choose to not see opportunities, I'm not going to see any opportunities. And I go back and forth through phases of my career where I just block opportunities out. Like we all go through that, so how do we mitigate that? Well, is I like to be, I can either like to have non-recourse debt where I don't have to sign personal guarantees is one way. Making sure that I have, at least 12 months of mortgage payments and repairs for all of my rental properties and all of my apartments, all of my mortgage payments, putting a HELOC on my primary residence to pay down so I'm not paying a payment. I only will do it if I already paid the cash for it. I'm not the one, I don't do it on the note. I'll pay cash and refi out. So that 90% will become basically my emergency fund bank account. So that's another layer. And then you can get deeper than that too with like life insurance and different types of credit. But people like to build up. Like that's great. You want to build your wealth up. I like to also build my wealth down. I like to make my foundations more and more levels, because the more foundation you have, the stronger you are to go up when it's time. If you go only up, then you have nothing. Like one little mistake, it could just bottom you out.
So what can you talk about that a little bit more? What do you mean by building down as opposed to building up?
Well, I guess all right. So for instance, let's pretend I have a balloon payment coming up. It's $500,000, right? The market sucks. I can't refinance it. So what do I have to do? I have to sell it or dump it and give it back to the bank. Well, since I now have this layer of these HELOCs, I could take money out of my HELOC and I could pay it down. Layer one would be just using cash, right? Available liquid cash. Let's say I don't want to use that. My HELOC is my next level. So I can pull out of my HELOC to pay that off. If I don't want to do that, my life insurance policy is underneath that layer to be able to do the same thing. So I'm mitigating my own risk by not over leveraging everything, but leveraging certain things in certain ways, right? I wouldn't normally put a 90% mortgage on my house unless I had access to that 90%. So I'm really only in my house for 10% with no payment because I paid it all back unless I need it.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so you mentioned HELOC, and I know that's a strategy that you like to tell newbies, I guess. So what exactly is a HELOC, and then how can you use that to get started in your investments?
Yeah, great question. Well, a HELOC is basically, it's a line of credit against real estate. So think of a mortgage that is not just a lien of principal and interest that you have to pay back over time. You have the terms as you have to pay it back over time, but it's treated as a line of credit, like a credit card. It's basically if somebody says, I'm going to give you a credit card for a deed of trust on your house for 90% of the value, and you say, okay. And you can swipe that card when you want, and you just pay the bill when you swipe the card for whatever interest you use. So if I pull $20,000 out of it to buy a car, I'm only paying interest on that $20,000. So that's another great way to finance yourself, because you're actually also writing off all of the interest and stuff like that too. And then, it's just like another layer. Like a lot of people use different funds to be able to do that. So they kind of pay themselves in one way, but they're not paying a bank. They're still paying interest, but it goes back to them.
Yeah. So my understanding is that has to be your primary residence. Can you do this on multiple houses that you own?
So yeah, absolutely you can. You just have to find someone to do that. I had one on a primary residence, and then I just moved out of that, made it a rental, and bought another primary with cash, did the same thing. And then I did it on one of my rentals. And then I did it actually on a piece of land. So some of these, it's a commercial product, right? You may only get 50, 60%, but you still get 50, 60%, right? Because you're paying cash for these anyway. So I have one. So basically I have few houses, couple rentals, a primary, and land right now are the four.
Interesting. This is the first time I've heard of land.
Yeah, it's not something that like you can go to a bank and say, hey, will you do a HELOC? It's like, hey, we've done all these deals together. Is it cool if I? And they're like usually like, yes. A bank that you have a good relationship with, that you have a lot of deposit, which is a big key. Like how much money you have at that bank also helps like you be able to get to do those creative type of things for sure. And I think you were asking me before, like how do you use a HELOC to get started? Yes. So you want to look at your house. Let's just pretend that it's a $500,000. You paid $300,000 for this house. It's worth $500, right? You've owned it for 5 years. You owe $200 on it. So what you can do is you can refinance it, right? You could get a loan for the 80% of the value for $400,000, cash out on that. That's just a normal refinance, and then you have to pay on the $400,000 note by taking your equity out. Well, you can also do that in a line of credit, where you don't do an actual refinance, but you do into a HELOC. So the advantages are like you're only paying interest only, you're only paying on the balance, and you can access it whenever you want. So if you were to do a refinance and you don't have any, and you want to take the equity, then you have to pay the payment. So if you buy a house with cash, or you use some of that equity, because you're going to get some of it back, you're going to cash it back. So you're going to actually get the money. You don't have to pay a payment on it, but you have it in hand. So now it's like your mortgage, you can't access, you pay your principal down every year. You can't access that principal, right? But all the principal, you put it on the HELOC every month, you can access it whenever you want. Just your payment goes up because you pay more interest. So if you need a down payment for something, or like, wow, this deal is awesome, I need to throw $100 grand into this real quick. I don't have time to get approvals, and I have an under whatever. You just write yourself a check and you do that. I did that, and I did that on a loan. Actually, I took from my HELOC and lent on it to get the arbitrage in between the interest rates and the points.
Nice. Yeah. So I know we talked about this in one of our first couple episodes, is that's how we got started.
Yeah.
We used a HELOC for my primary residence.
This is such a great strategy. Everybody should do it. Everybody. It
worked out great. And I do know of some other people that also had HELOCs, but then they got a little bit scared because interest rates were going up. And so what do you tell people? Like, interest rates are going up, you just have to make a higher interest, or you have to generate more money than you're paying, basically. And it's as simple as that, or what do you tell them?
So you're going to have to plan. So if the bank tells you your payment is excess 7%, run your numbers on that 10% and see if you're comfortable with that payment. And that's just assuming you make no money, like your income doesn't increase and all these different things, right? But there's also something else you can do is you can kind of chase introductory rates. Like a lot of these banks will have like 2.9 for 6 months or 5% for the first year. So you do 5% and month 10 rolls around, you start trying to find another one. So a lot of people will do that. The interest rate, it takes a lot of work, but they'll chase those interest rate, the intros. And some people will do that. Sometimes it's just refinancing amount to a mortgage that you're comfortable with is another way. You're still getting your money back out. You just can't access it again.
Yeah. And you don't have to get a HELOC from the same bank where your first mortgage.
No, you actually probably will not.
They're
not going to they probably wouldn't do that, because you got to remember the bank doesn't really want to do it. That's why nobody really knows about it. So for instance, like the closing costs are usually like $500 to $1,000. You're not paying 2 points and lender fees and all that. You'll have to pay for the appraisal and your transfer tax, but you're looking at like $2,000 of closing costs instead of 10 or 15 on like a $400,000 purchase. So banks don't make any money off of it. The banks, and then when I put the money back in at the day it funds, they don't make any interest off it either, right? But they still have the value of the note, so that at the very least they have the value of the note for when they sell their portfolios of notes. It goes along with it. So that's kind of like a way to almost beat the bank. It's like I have all their money. They have the lien, great, they could have it, and and these primary residence HELOCs are 30-year loans too. So if your house just appreciates in value, just keep doing it. Refi again, get more money every 5-10 years, depending on how long you live there.
So prior to getting into real estate, you mentioned doing like playing music and working in restaurants. With the nursing, like there's been some talk of like just being familiar with like terms like in the medical field and like learning the terms in real estate. Like what did you kind of experience as you started that process of learning this new lingo and all these different tactics? Was there something that you felt set you up for this?
I think my ability to learn things sets me up for it, because when I want to know something, I don't sit there and Google every little thing. I find somebody that I know that's done something like this before, and I ask them a couple questions. And then I ask somebody else. 90% of the knowledge that I've learned is throughout the deals that I do and the people that I work with. You're telling me about terms. I don't even know if I know all these terms. I know how to get these things done. I know the questions to ask, but I don't know, I flunked out of college. Never took any type of financing classes. I just learned from one deal to the next deal to the next deal, and then just taking some risk and saying some things, and people actually saying yes. So like, hey, you can buy me out of this deal. I can charge you a ridiculous amount. And people have said yes, right? So sometimes it's just taking some risk and trying different things. But I have people in my network and on my team that specialize in different things that I don't have to necessarily learn, because I don't want to have to know everything, because things change too much to sit and learn so much information. So you can sit and learn about taxes all day and become an expert in 2023, but once 2024 hits around, you have to learn everything again. Yeah. So I just need to know how to get through the deals I have in front of me, and I know how to say the right things to the sellers and the buyers to make a deal happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And time in the game is
time in the game.
You kind of said that. You've said that. Well, you said it takes work to get your HELOC, and you've mentioned a few things already just in this interview is the more that you do things, the more time that you have in there, the more deals you do with a single bank, they're willing to get more creative. Yep. And we experience that too. Like our first deal, I went around to a bunch of different banks and they're like, no, this is what we offer. Take it or leave it. But then after we did like 3, 4, 5 deals, then they're like, okay, yeah, I think we could do this for you. Or I think we can work with you on this.
Yeah. That was tough for me too. I made like a resume and I gave them to banks. I'm like, here's 3 lenders that I have loans on. Call them to see if I've ever been late on a payment. And I give them my whole profile, like my assets, like how much I make. I'm like, I've never mixed these payments. And believe it or not, they eat that up. Yeah. Because you think that you're talking to this bank and this president, but it's really just a committee of people that look at you and say, okay, he's in our risk profile. We can take a chance. It's really such a people game that people don't realize. Like, because I don't like to use that many institutional banks. Of course, I have to use Chase and Wells Fargo and stuff like that, unfortunately. But those aren't where I'm really getting my relationships. My relationships are from this community bank that I send a text to get a wire set up. I can mail them a check in the mail and they can deposit for me to avoid a fee. They have those. It's such a people relationship game in the banking world.
For sure.
As you're looking for mentors or when you were starting out, I always hear people talking about bringing value to somebody. So what was your kind of tactic in doing that?
Yeah, great question. So one thing I've always been good at is acquisition. Without there's value in the deal, no matter what position you're in, the value's in the deal. So I figured if I can just bring deals, I'll find people and then I'll find money. So really it's just like bringing deals to enough people and understanding how they buy and what their criteria is, banks' criteria and stuff like that is probably the best way that I've done it, is just by bringing something of value to somebody and just figuring out how they do it. Whether you just kind of watch the process with them, see what they do, or you just talk to them. Like, I'm not afraid to ask questions. Like, everybody thinks that as a real estate agent, you should be the one that knows everything about real estate. And like, you're my client, so I'm going to tell you everything about real estate. I don't want to know everything. So I'm like, so what do you mean? Why do you run your numbers that way? I've never seen that before. Can you tell me more about that? Why do you use that person? Why do you do these certain things? So, because you can know this information, but without real life application, it just goes to the wayside. It doesn't go anywhere because every area, that's why real estate is so different. The regulations, the terrain, everything is just so different that it's just, you have to know how to work those real life situations and the areas and the experts in those areas that work those type of deals.
Yeah. So your first step, it sounds like, was learning how to find deals. But so that sounds pretty difficult though. Like, how did you learn to find deals? Because I mean, you could take this one deal and as a newbie, you're like, oh, it's a great deal. And then you take it to someone who knows what they're doing. They're like, no, this is
right.
terrible.
But then now I know figure it out? that deal is terrible. And now I'm going to say, why is it terrible? And I'm going to change my criteria a little bit. I can't tell you how many email blasts I just throw out a ridiculous number just to see what people say. Like, that's just a normal thing that we do. Like, one part of our process is when we're doing entitlements is to list it for double market value. 75% of the time we've gotten way more than we thought for a lot of these deals that happens. It could be somebody next door that needs to do an assemblage. It could be, because property around each other is worth more in a certain area. So like your neighbors are like your best bet to like sell out of these and all those big builders for the land and stuff like that. So it's easier to just, be able to do it that way and throw numbers out there. Just, if I have 5 people that are interested at this number, it's like, cool. Who wants to offer more? It's like, we used to meet people out at the property. I used to just, a lot of people like to do a showing, like, I'm just going to show this one person and then I'm going to let them go and sneak this other person in. I just want everybody there at once. So I want because I want to meet everybody. I want them to meet each other too, because they could be making connections. And then I want to see who knows who too, because, back in those days when you're wholesaling, you got 20 people looking at a property, 5 or 6 people or probably half the group. Oh, they just know each other. Right. So now I'm learning, like, it just maximizes like my networking instead of just going one-to-one. It's like one-to-many. So that's like that's why email blasts, one-to-many, social media posts, one-to-many, my coaching, group coaching, one-to-many.
Well, and also I'm sure like bringing a bunch of people to the property all at once, if you brought one person, you can say, oh yeah, I have like 5 people interested, and they're all like, oh, sure you do.
Oh yeah. I just love waiting outside and just be like, here they come.
Yeah. Nice. And then everybody's scrambling. Oh, we need to offer more so we can actually get this done.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that strategy.
I mean, you just got to throw
noted. I'm writing that down.
Market research is throwing darts out there, and it changes all the time. So you have to throw these darts out there all the time, and in the same way. It's like the market changes, but I want to see how they're going to react to this. So when you have a good network of a couple thousand people that I'm sending a property to, or I go online to, I mean, I can get feedback on how to, adjust it. So when I go to market or want highest and best use, I have all these opinions of what they could be compared to what I think. And I don't care what I think. I want to know what everybody else wants because I'm trying to sell it to as many people as I can. Right.
Yeah. So how do you use that strategy for buying deals? Because I know when we were first starting, Colin, myself, everybody, super scared to throw out a lowball number because you don't want to hurt feelings, you don't want to deal with that. So how do you tackle that on the acquisition side?
So I don't mind throwing lowball offers out because I'll throw those numbers out and I'm very assumptive. It's like I'm just going to assume that your house is in the absolute worst condition, or it has. So I'm just going to throw a lowball number out there that gives me no risk. So it's almost like an uneducated lowball number just to see what the reaction is. Because if they counter a price, then they're motivated. And if they don't counter a price, they're probably either don't really know who you are, they don't really trust you, or they're not, maybe they're just not motivated, right? So, and it depends on the asset. Single family, and if the longer people lived in a house, they want more money. And it's just like, kind of gauging their motivation a little bit beforehand. It's like you can kind of go in a different direction. Commercial and multifamily, for instance, that's tough. So the parameter I use on that is usually if someone wants to sell multifamily, they're happy to pass over their financials, right? Here's the rent roll, the P&L, the T12. And the people that don't, or either have really bad books because, the books show the value of what their books create your value, and they don't have really good books, or they want way too much. So I usually try to get the financials and make a cap rate decision based upon that. So somebody wants $15 million for an apartment, and I run the numbers, and I think it's $8 million. I'll send a form of LOI saying it's $8 million, and here's why. And depending on their motivation, moves the needle in either direction.
So when you're throwing an offer like that, that's almost like half of what they're asking. Do you find that that's like kind of a one and done type thing if they don't counter, or will you then come back with another offer if you're actually interested in it?
It depends on their motivation.
Okay.
Like if they are countering at a high number because they have no reason, like they bought an apartment building, they live for free in one of the units, and they have absolutely no care in the world to do anything else, is going to be way more of probably somebody that I would have to wait out, right? Either do an estate or something. But and it also depends, is it privately owned by a person? Is it institutionalized? Do they have a committee? Is it a syndication where they have to go through a corporation or something? That all makes a difference too. And then, you almost have to also be mindful of where you can get your lending and stuff on. So a lot of the multifamily, if I have a lender looking at it, they are the ones that really need all the financials because they're going to run their numbers on it. They're going to tell me whether I have a deal or not. If it's not in that 1.25 DSCR, you're not going to get the deal. So if a bank's not going to lend to me on it, they're probably not going to lend to anybody else. So Mr. Seller, if anybody's going to use financing, this is the numbers they really need to be on. I can get a little bit closer to your number if you want to hold the note for a while since you don't anything on it. Maybe I could pay you, but I can't get financing any more of this unless you want to hold maybe a down payment or hold back some of this, and I could take less from. So that now you have a really strong case to negotiate, and it's a realistic case. It's either that way or not. If somebody wants to overpay that, then let them. It's just probably not going to be me.
Yeah, I think that's something that has kind of worked in our favor that we didn't, initially it's like you hear like the banks are the enemy almost. And it's like, now you're kind of like learning as they're underwriting this thing themselves. It's like, they want it to make sense for them because they don't want to lose money. So it's like, you can actually utilize them as an ally essentially. But just the creative piece that you're talking about, it's like, I think, prior to investing in real estate, it was just like, okay, you either have to come up with like 5, 10, 20% down to buy these things. But now it's like, we've done some creative deals, and it's just like like the world like opens, and it's like a no just means like, okay, well, how else can we run this? And like it's just kind of a cool thing to experience and to go through. And having done it ourselves, it's like, oh yeah, this actually happens. Like you hear it on Bigger Pockets or these things, and it's like, oh yeah, but they're doing something special or illegal or something. It's like, oh no, this actually works. So it's been a cool thing for us to experience. And it sounds like you're going through the, I mean, you've kind of worked through every situation possible.
Yeah. I mean, a negotiation is really just understanding the other person's point of view for that.
Yeah.
So some like for large land, when these people own these, that back and forth will go for sometimes a month or two easily over something that they're thinking about and they're waiting on an answer. And then they finally come back to you and then you respond and then they sit and think because it's, and it is about being creative. It depends. It goes back to motivation. It's like this one little step is going to make either me less motivated or them be more motivated or they're more motivated. Right. So it's like, how do you kind of like inch to that next direction? Right. And the longer it takes to negotiate a deal is usually the better deal. So it's, I get nervous when somebody just throws me like the exact terms and price I want immediately. I'm like, yeah, something up here. No. No.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So you've mentioned land, like what you're doing with land. And I know we're on a bit of a time limit today, but all right. Yeah. Do you mind talking about what you're doing with all this land development? And your land development in your perspective is not what we imagine it was. So yeah, talk about that.
Yeah. So we develop land. So what I mean by developing land is we take the raw land and we turn it into the highest and best use. It could be through city, municipalities, any type of encumbrances. And then that is going to maybe yield a certain amount of pads, building pads. And then we sell that to a builder to take it. And then they're going to develop the land, meaning they're going to put in the underground infrastructure. And then they're going to go vertical with the units and build the property and exit however they want to. So we're like in between the raw land and the builder. So the builders, they don't have time to spend a year and the resources to get these rezoned the way they need to be. That's why you see a lot of these Goodall Homes and Ryan Homes and Lennar, like they buy their stamped pads, but they're buying them after entitlement. And usually somebody else is doing that entitlement before them. Or they're getting at a really steep discount and doing it themselves. But that's just not their model. That's a whole different division. It's like for a builder to be a developer, it's crazy. It's usually not the same type of skill set, the same type of thing. So we like to be in the middle. We don't take the risk. We actually close and buy these properties before too. So we know that we're buying them at a good price too. If we have to land bank it for years and years, we're okay with that. But, a lot of these are to be able to exit to these builders and they take them and build them and we move on to the next one.
Are you comfortable walking a deal with us? So like, are you buying like farmland and then you just like retitle it till like a builder can throw a 50-unit apartment building on it? Or
if I could add to that, I was just going to say like, how are you underwriting land? Because that's, underwriting is like a big thing for a lot of people, but it's easier when there's like a building or cash flow or something.
Right. But back to what I said before, I'm not a builder. I'm not going to be building it. So why do I even need to underwrite it? I just need to know the market value of price per pad. And I also need to have a good estimation of what the infrastructure cost is so I could know what my full pad price is and making sure that price meets what we think the exit price could be. And that's just in today's numbers. These developments, they take a year or two. So, you don't know. So if I underwrite it, what is it going to matter in 6 months or 3 months even? That's going to be totally different. So for me they're the ones I need to underwrite it. Their banks, just like the HELOCs, their banks are going to underwrite the new construction deals, and then they're going to land on those parameters. So for us to do that, it just doesn't make sense. It's just work that we don't need to do on our end. So we don't underwrite the deals. We market value price per pad, and we do infill, which is it could be attached or detached townhome type communities in cities, or we can do rural, which are like, the 0.1, 0.2 single family home subdivision pads.
All right. And yeah, I was going to ask like how could somebody as a new investor get into land in that way? Because it sounds like there's a lot of what you already have to have a really good base knowledge of what you're doing before you can get into this. Is there a way for newbies to start doing these land entitlements?
Yeah, well, you have to find a favorable market. So how do you do that? You see if there's area that's not rent controlled, that's development friendly, that has favorable neighborhood policies, favorable zoning, stuff like that. So finding your market and then making sure that there's enough absorption where if you build 100 apartments that you can rent 100 apartments or 1,000 apartments, whatever. So finding your market, talking to city planners and figuring out, narrow down a few cities, go talk to city planners and see what they're wanting to do in their city. You're either going to get the city planners that drive you around and show you everything. You're going to get the ones that say, well, my God, here we go, another one, so you want to make sure that you're in a favorable area. And then you just put criteria of what you think the end buyers are doing. So if you look at an area, you see, well, who's building and what are they building? And what are they selling it for? So if I look at, let's just pick a random Tampa, Florida, I'm going to maybe see Goodall Homes here. And I'm like, oh, well, what did they pay for that? And how many did they get on that? And I'm going to see these guys here. So then I'm trying to model what they've already done. Okay, they're buying agriculture over 20 acres and they're not doing sewer. They're doing sewer main extensions. Cool. So we don't need to have sewer. So then you put your criteria together and then you kind of start doing the entitlement process and then you call all those builders and you sell it to them. And that's on a large process, but you can do that with infill too. It's like a street, you see two builds going on, all those lots and those houses can be tear down to build two. So now you have, in a small parameter, and those are all different builders that are most likely buy your product or there's mixed use going on over here. Who's doing that? Because when you get to those larger assets, there's only 10 buyers per deal. You don't have a million buyers. You have the buyer that knows the market there, who has their subs there, who runs their numbers there, who knows the codes there. So it's like there's not a massive amount of buyers for these really niche products.
What's like I think I interrupted Josh there when he was like talking about like maybe giving an example of one deal.
Oh yeah, sure. So let's see, what was okay. So here's one I did a case study on. It is a property in Nashville. It was 2 acres. I usually pull it up, so I have to think. It was like 2 acres, and it had they were going to do a car wash on it. It was 2 zonings. There was residential on the top, a street here, and then a street here where it had commercial here. That had an easement for a Dollar General, a stormwater pond, and then plans to build a car wash. So on going after properties, this guy probably 10 times said that he wasn't interested in selling. And then one day he said he was. And then he didn't remember who I was, but I have the notes and everything from our conversation, so I knew exactly where to take the conversation. I pulled it up. And when he said yes to my price, I was like, really? I was like, is that for both parts? At that time, it was 2 parcels. He said yes. So I was like, okay. So immediately sent him a contract, got it under contract for $1 million. So what we had to do here was figure out a lot of that easement with the dollar store. We had to split off the residential, subdivide those into lots, make utility easements to get into the property, turn the bottom into just commercial only, figure out the easement issue, and then we started putting a site plan together, and I think we got like about 45, 46 townhomes. So we closed. So while we're doing that, of course, we closed pretty quick on that. And because we knew, it's on major road, it was just such a great deal. So then long story short, fixed all those encumbrances. And I just think we listed it for fun. Like I said, we just overpriced everything. I think for like 5.5 or whatever. And it just sat out there for a while. We didn't care because when we buy these, we came for 20 years. We're cool with it, right? We're doing this for the long run. Put it out there, had the concept, and it's nice because you can do either commercial, mixed use, or a mix of both. So we put a concept together with commercial and units in the front. Then we did all townhomes, and then we did all these different concepts that could help justify the value. So I got a random call one day from somebody that wanted the deal. That's somebody that I happen to know that we just sold another deal to down the street. So he already knows the product. It's a really good buyer. So he landed up locking it up with us. And we went through a lot of encumbrances with fire, retaining walls, just like really had to, because their only contingencies, they wanted to have an approved site plan to see how many builds they could get on it. And we thought that from what they were paying, we felt like that was fair. So we went through the process along with them. We require our end buyers to join, either work with our engineer that already worked on the property, or their engineer has to work with our engineer, because there's only like 1 or 2 engineers in the whole couple zip codes that know the sewer, that know these roads, that know all the things. Like you don't bring somebody new into this, right? You're having to pull SPs and all these different plans from different neighboring properties, either from years ago or now, to try to map out like what you have to deal with. So that took maybe 3 or 4 months of due diligence. And then, so during that time, we only sold them the commercial. We kept the residential. So we ended up selling the commercial closed for 4.4, and then we sold the single family lots for, I think we got 175 a piece. They were just single family lots. But there's 2 missed opportunities. Number one, the person who bought our 4 single family lots is rezoning them and adding more density. We didn't think we can do that because of the neighborhood policy, but it looks like he's actually able to do it. So good for him, whatever. I mean, 175 for a single family pad is ridiculous anyway, so we're happy with that, right? And then the other missed opportunity was the guy next door. So these pads were STR eligible in our city, but there's a daycare next door. So that means in the first 50 feet, you cannot do STR. So we were talking to the neighbor too about buying his property, and he had an operating business, and he wanted way too much. So the guy who bought it from us actually landed up working a deal with him anyway and bought the deal. So he put the assemblage together, and now his value add is he can do all STR, and then he can build on the other side. So it was a great win-win for him. And, it was a great win-win for us. But, would we have known to grab that one next door would have been cool. And if I knew that we could have rezoned the 4 that we had and maybe get more, I would have done that too. But it's like weighing out the time frame and the return. It's like, okay, it's like, I could sit and wait for another $100,000 or $50,000, or I could buy something else that makes me 3 times that in another deal, right? So it's like.
So how much money does it cost to do what you had? Because you said it was about 3 months of due diligence, or 4 months. Say 4 months. How much does it cost you to work with all these engineers and lawyers and whatever you're dealing with?
Well, it depends. So that could be how far it has to go in the process and what you have to do. Attorneys, they basically close our deals for us. They charge us a fee they actually write up all our contracts and redline and send them back and do all that stuff. Then you've got your engineering and your civil, and you're hiring a civil engineer in a firm to help you get through rezoning. We do it ourselves, but you can hire a firm. You got permit fees and stuff like that. So, but when we go under contract with someone, we are giving them, they're the ones that have to take all those invoices over now. So anything moving forward is on them. And then, so theoretically, if we have anything open, that they have to pay those as well. So we try to mitigate our risks that way. But any deal could cost it costs as little as 10 or 20 grand to get done, and it costs as much as 300 to 400 grand to get done, right? Depending on what you have to do.
So for this particular deal, let's just say it was 400 grand.
No, this was like a 10 grand one. This one, we didn't even have anything approved. We probably, I don't even think we got a survey. And that's a great thing. The seller had a survey done that's like everything we needed at the beginning. So we really didn't pay for that much. I don't think we paid probably more than, I have to look, but more than 10 or 20 grand for that one.
Wow. So what I just heard you say is you made almost $3 million for 4 months of headaches.
We owned it for a year too.
For a year? Okay. Yeah. For a year of headaches.
Yeah. So I'm seeing like a 14,000, a 10,000, 5,000 bill, 5,000. Yeah. So maybe about 30, 40 grand maybe.
Wow. But still, like all of that stuff you were saying at the beginning, I was like, wow, that sounds like so much work and a ton of headaches. But then when you break it down, like you made almost $3 million for that many.
And
headaches.
That's exactly what the builders don't want to do is the builders can't deal with those headaches. They need them pad ready to go because their banks aren't going to wait. So and you think they're headaches, but we kind of have the structure really well. Like we have a great relationship with our engineer who does a lot of the work for us that we pay them. one guy on my team, his job is to know the code and to get all the entitlements done. And it's like playing chess. It's like you do one thing and you wait, right? We pay the attorney for the quiet title. We wait 60 days, right? We submit our application for this and we wait. We have a meeting with the planning department and the TDOT or the roads, and then you wait. So it's like I call it playing chess is what it is. It's like I can either do a bunch of little deals or I can do like a few of these deals a year and, reinvest that money and be a much quicker trajectory to, financial freedom.
I think you're going to talk about stacked university or stacked investing.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
Exactly.
Stacked investing. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
So stacked investing is the podcast. Stacked investing is kind of like my stacked capital brands, and I have stacked university. We basically teach agents how to become real estate investors. And stacked to me is like I've been saying the whole time, it's multiple very small input for the maximum output, one to many. So how many times how many income strategies are in one deal? Now, is that in the deal? Like for instance, this week, I funded a loan. So I lent the money. I get the interest on my money. I get my points for lending on the loan. And then as a real estate agent, I get a listing agreement. So I get to sell the house. So I get the listing, the points, so it's just like development. I get the wholesale fee, and then I get the listings on the back end. So that could be a wholesale fee. It could be some listings on the back end. It could be where I actually give some money and lend toward the deal. And might be one. So it's like, what all could you do to maximize you're mitigating your risk and you're maximizing your returns by doing it like that. So just try to think of, so I teach the different ways that we this is not a single family home. What are the 10 things you can do to this property? And what questions do you ask the seller to get to the best win-win, right?
Okay. And you teach all this in your stacked
And we teach in stacked university.
Yeah. Okay. Is that just for agents, or do you have nurses that come through every once in a while?
So it could be really good for nurses. And so you have I like to say you have two different types of investors. And I'm going to say easy words like active and passive. Your passive investors, like your lawyers, your doctors, your nurses, they don't have time to do all this due diligence and hunt these deals down. They just need their money to put somewhere. So that's a great way for someone to be passive. And yes, I can teach those passive strategies 100%. And then there's also the active strategy, someone like me who's just enjoys being in the field. I actually have the time, but that's why I'm just not getting paid on my money. I'm getting equity because I'm bringing the deals. And I'm happy to teach on that too. And nurses and other people, I know a lot of professionals and CPAs and nurses that will do this type of work and they end up leaving their job. So if CPAs, if you don't love your job, I've seen so many people quit their jobs and then just do real estate full time. Nurses probably love their jobs and they love the people aspect of it, but it's nice to be able to do that where you want to do it and not that you have to do it. It's more, that becomes more of a passion project.
And that's what we're trying to do
here
and we mentioned earlier, like, you don't get wealthy as a nurse, so you're going to have to think of something else to do. And this is a great way to do it.
And nurses are special people. Like I could never do what nurses do. So I think nurses, I'm very thankful for nurses that are in that field that will do the things that I cannot do. So, at the same time, you don't want to take them out of that position, but they definitely need to be able to retire when they want and be able to feel good about it.
All right. So we'll jump to our final segment here, the final 5. First question is, what's a top financial resource that you found, whether a book, podcast, or where do you go to educate yourself about finances?
Where do I go to educate myself about finances? Well, I guess I go to groups of people I know. Go Abundance, real estate investing groups, depending on what the topic is. But I think the best is just real life people in the field doing the work. You can Google whatever you want. It depends if it's something small or not, but I'd say generally people that I know.
Yeah. And number 2 is what advice would you give your younger self?
Advice I would give my younger self probably be to grow my risk tolerance younger and not have passed on so many deals until I learned the uncomfortableness of taking risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, risk tolerance is a
It
huge
is,
one.
because I've never done anything like this before. And like, even if you're a kid and you can like sell baseball cards and stuff, that still gives you something, right? So it's like you build your risk tolerance and that degree.
Yeah.
Especially for your first deal, I guess.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. All right, number 3, what are you trying to accomplish in 2024?
Trying to accomplish in 2024. It would be nice to have about 500 units to go through the pipeline this year. And that's our biggest goal for development is the 500 units.
Yeah. So you're doing these land entitlements based on that. You're getting the land and then retitling for final 500 units.
Well, yeah, it could be
or you're
one
getting
deal for
500 units
50.
yourself.
Right now, our criteria is anything that could yield 100 units or more. So that would be 5 deals, theoretically at 100 units. But that's not to say like we have quite a few already, but 500 new would be fantastic.
Cool. So number 4 is if you were to tell people to do one thing, what would that thing be?
If I were to tell people to do one thing, what would that thing be? Be as humble as possible and act like you don't know anything. Be the sponge to learn and ask questions.
Yeah, that's powerful right there. I know a lot of people, they enjoy educating people. And if you've already heard something, just act like you haven't heard it before, because as soon as you act like you already know it, they're not going to give you any more advice or any more education that you probably
there's
need.
Hundreds and thousands of perspectives.
Yeah, and I think just like people want to come in and look confident, so they appear a certain way to make themselves look better. But it's like, yeah, if you just show up humble, ready to learn, like I feel like that goes so far.
Yeah, you've got the guy that walks into the networking event like this, kind of knows everybody. And then you got the guy that just like, hey, asking questions instead of like, here I am. It's like, who are you?
Absolutely. And I think, Greg, you're a great example to that too, because at the beginning of the podcast, you're like, I don't know everything. But then after this last hour, we were hearing everything that you've done.
Sounds like you do know everything.
Sounds like you know everything.
Well, I don't know everything, but I could talk about those things.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's great. Okay, last one is, what's the biggest financial mistake that you've made?
Biggest financial mistake I've made in the short story is I didn't make sure a business partner was clear on an operating agreement. So a company that I had an operating agreement with building houses that I lent on, that I got paid out of for a certain equity stake in the next partnership, didn't get conveyed. It was my fault. Definitely my fault. I didn't make sure we were clear, and people came to me like, are you guys good? And I thought we were, and it was very early on in my career. And I was supposed to get a partnership stake and this and that. And it turned out that didn't happen. And that was a big, massive 6-figure mistake. And the person who was in the other partnership was a great friend of mine, even still. He truly didn't know about it. And it's like, the end of the 4th quarter of the project, and he's now has this massive equity bill that he didn't know about after like he's already run the numbers. He did all these things. And it was unfortunate, but we definitely put that bridge underneath us as a learning experience for sure. I mean, that was, at least I didn't theoretically lose money, but it was definitely a big financial mistake. And then even the daycare I talked about, that was a great financial mistake too. I think I paid like $3 or $4 million for it. I could have made another $1 million. But that's what, when we talk about college, I dropped out of college, but I just paid $1 million. That's 101.1 in my education right there, right?
Yeah.
It's an expensive university, even by today's standards.
Yeah.
Right. That's my point.
Yeah. So where can people find you? Where are you on social media or anything?
Yeah, I'm on all the things. I mean, I'm Greg Fariicielli. You're not going to find another one. So if you Google my name, Greg Fariicielli, you will definitely find everything you can on me. And I'm easy to get a hold of, and love to look at any deals. I love to invest in any deals, syndications, apartment buildings, multifamily, land, anything like that. All the things.
Can people find out about your university through your name, or do you have a website?
Oh, yeah. That website would be stackeduniversity.com.
Cool.
Yep. So
and,
we do.
and I think,
Sounds good.
well, sorry, I was going to say, I thought you mentioned that like you guys help people get their first deal as well, right?
Yeah, that's the goal. The perfect avatar is somebody who already kind of knows real estate, because this goes pretty advanced pretty quick. but we can start from the beginning.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate this. Thanks for the time and all the education, and thanks for not knowing everything, but then telling us everything.
My pleasure, guys. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Take care, Greg.